Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. It's Fran here, and I'm back with my Game Week 6 team reveal. Just quickly, just discuss about Game Week 5. I think you guys all watched my review, but effectively just got 77 points all out. Not too bad considering I missed on the Haaland captaincy, so that was a swing of 7 points. In reality, not the worst situation, because it did look like so much more of an easy game on paper for Haaland, and just watching both matches, that was clearly the case. Salah had some good chances late in the second half, but all in all, Haaland is pretty much the dream asset in FPL. I think he might even be a captaincy option still in Game Week 6, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. With the defense, I actually wanted to consider one of the first changes being potentially moving Ramsdale to Pope. But as you guys all know, because I feature RODRIGO in my team, he was the most pressing transfer possible. And I feel like spending 2 free transfers this week, a luxury transfer moving out of Ramsdale doesn't seem like it makes the most sense. I do think this Arsenal team have shown to be a very good defense. They have still, for some reason, conceded some really, really wonky goals and arguably should have kept more clean sheets by now. So similar to Brighton, I feel like they're a team that could have really started the season with 3 clean sheets, but so far we only have 1 to Ramsdale's name, and a lot of people are making the question of whether he should be transferred out. I feel like the options simply still are Sanchez, which doesn't feel good if you already have a Brighton defender, and then someone like Pope potentially, or Henderson, because Henderson has great games until the Game Week 9 wildcard. And as far as someone like Pope, we've just seen so much consistency from this Newcastle team, some great performances as well, versus both Liverpool and City. And even amongst playing those 2 top teams that always create a lot of XG, we still see Newcastle as one of the better defenses when it comes to the underlying stats. So I feel like Ramsdale to Pope is still a transfer on my mind. And on the other hand, I think the defense actually looks perfectly fine as it is. I'm actually going to play Nico Williams this week as opposed to Dunk. So you guys will know that I have Dunk in my team. I did bag the own goal. And unfortunately, I'm not going to let Dunk have another opportunity at a -1 here. I think Nico Williams has a lot of upside this week. He's playing versus a Bournemouth team that have amassed very, very poor XG. The last game out versus Wolves was a dire performance. They really didn't muster any attacking chances whatsoever. And with a new manager, I don't really subscribe to the theory of a new manager bounce necessarily. Yes, Nottingham Forest are also one of the worst defenses in the league, but I do back the kind of upside of Nico Williams in this week. And if there's ever going to be a week I play Nico Williams, who actually is 3rd in expected goal involvement in the league for defenders, I think it's this one. So Nico Williams does play for me ahead of Dunk, even though Dunk for me is a great first sub, I would say, and maybe even could have started over, let's say, if I wanted to keep RODRIGO for whatever reason in my team. James, Trent, and Cancelo, I've been talking about these assets all the time. James is someone who I deliberately chose to keep in my team. I'm really hoping he plays versus West Ham. We saw him in training recently, so that's a huge positive sign. And I think James is someone who completely changes his Chelsea team. Not necessarily defensively, they still look very, very poor, and they are overrun in the midfield. But just in terms of the chances that he can create himself and how explosive he can be, I think James is just the top asset to have, and I'm really glad that I actually kept him and also managed to get the Andreas points on the weekend to allow for that to happen. So James stays in the team. James is going to start versus West Ham, and then we have Trent and Cancelo, who are always going to be permanent fixtures. I do like Trent on paper versus Everton, but we always know the Merseyside derbies are quite chaotic. Last season, I actually captained Trent versus Everton, if you guys remember, and then got destroyed by a Salah haul. So we'll see what happens. I do think this is going to be a great Trent game on paper, and it's an interesting point in the season where even around my rank, Cancelo, Trent, and James actually provide me a lot of differential. So especially with a lot of managers moving out of James last week, I feel like this is a great opportunity to capitalize on this and hopefully get some hauls. Moving into the midfield, I've actually made one change, and that transfer is going to be into Trossard. This is a confirmed transfer and something that I think I will absolutely be doing tonight. RODRIGO is set to have a price fall. I narrowly escaped it last night, and Trossard is going to find his way onto my team. The reason why I'm doing this is because I won't have the intel on whether St. Maximin will be ready to play. I also don't really want to back a player who is, I would say, having a niggling injury. I think that could be a scenario where he could get further injured if he starts too early, or the manager can exercise a lot of precaution, just like he did with Isaac, for example, and maybe take off someone like St. Maximin quite early into the game, or even play him as a sub on the weekend. So I don't really like St. Maximin. I don't really like James Ward-Prowse as well. I've always talked about James Ward-Prowse being such a weird asset in FPL. It always feels like it's so hard to back when he hauls, because he's not someone who, you're expecting to dominate an open play. You're really just kind of begging for a set piece, but it doesn't really matter how tough the opponent is. He just needs to have that opportunity in the box, and you're not going to ever guess when that's going to happen. If you compare that to someone like Trippier, for example, the difference is Trippier can get clean sheets, whereas If you're just banking on Trippier to score free kicks, it's very tough to kind of pick the right situation for when Trippier can score. Because as you can see, Trippier can score versus a Man City team, and you probably wouldn't have expected for him to do so if you were just thinking about how easy games are for players and if you're playing around fixtures as opposed to what a player can do in a vacuum, right? The rest of the midfield is exactly the same. Luis Diaz, Martinelli, and Salah. Captaincy is something I'll discuss later in the video, but I do think Martinelli has just been a fantastic asset. I did talk about Odegaard briefly in my cheat sheet. A lot of people disagreed with me as to how good Odegaard is an asset. I do think he's getting a lot of shots, creating opportunities for himself, and he's moving into the box a lot. He even had chances, arguably, to score in the previous game versus Aston Villa, but I'm priced out of Odegaard, and unfortunately that's the situation that I find myself in. I can't really see myself moving into Iverson anytime soon, so I'm definitely not going into Odegaard or moving into Dean Henderson, who I'd still be priced out of. So that's the situation that I find myself in with my team. As far as someone like Luis Diaz, yes, it was a blank for him, and Salah did find a pretty, I would say, fortunate way to get 2 assists, but they still look like great assets. I think this Newcastle defense really has to be respected. They put in a great shift, even some of the players who don't usually play for Newcastle, so replacements for Bruno Guimaraes, and I was just really impressed with Newcastle's performance. And yes, there is something I think dramatically that has changed with this Liverpool team. They are struggling to deal with the press of certain teams, and they are being overrun in certain areas, and they don't have the same dominance over the ball, and I would say the comfort in terms of passing out of the back and actually finding a lot of opportunities. We see a lot of disorganization from the team where, for example, Joe Gomez sometimes will I would say, be a little bit underpatient and look for a really, really poor over-the-top ball. Van Dijk isn't necessarily also finding the same diagonal passes that he used to, and I feel like a lot of teams are finding patterns of play that Liverpool used to rely on and actually capitalize on them in a sense. And what I would still say though is Liverpool is one of the top teams in the league, and Everton are one of the teams in the league who, especially when you look at their last 10 games, including in the previous season, have shown to be one of the worst in terms of creating chances for the enemy team or allowing chances for the enemy team. And therefore this is a great opportunity to own both of these players. I think Salah really might be my captaincy. Moving into the forwards, Haaland and Jesus, I mean, they're non-negotiables at this point, at least until the wild card. Jesus specifically, Haaland's probably going to be a season keeper. I mentioned that on Twitter, and I don't think he's ever going to get out of my team, frankly, until he's injured. So with Haaland, I could even expect him to play versus Aston Villa. At this point, you're getting an asset who's playing 65 minutes a game, scoring hat-tricks within that amount of time, and arguably also getting enough rest. A little bit of stupid maths, to be honest. You know, if you're playing 60 minutes a game, you're playing 3 times a week, then arguably you've got a game's rest, which is what Pep said that Haaland would get. I'm obviously joking, of course, but this is the situation we find ourselves in. I feel like Haaland could start. He looks very fit. It doesn't seem like he's really struggling with the conditions at all. And I think there's a severe chance that he could even be someone that we put the armband on as we close into the fixture. And when we talk a little bit wider about captaincy now, I think my captaincy is immediately going to go in Salah for now, but I'll wait and see if we get any news on whether Haaland will start. And I think I am leaning towards probably a Salah captaincy by around 60% to 40%. I did completely bottle the captaincy last week and on stream. A lesson learned for myself, I would say, just in terms of being a content creator and someone who has to deal with an audience. But I think for now, the Salah captaincy makes the most sense. I do think Haaland should get rest, and hopefully he gets to start versus Sevilla, which means we'll be getting 20 to 30 minutes of Haaland, in which case I prefer Salah a lot more. And even if we compare fixtures, a team like Aston Villa have actually dropped off the cliff. I would say they are a team that has struggled very much this season in contrast to the previous one, and probably one of the most out of form teams so far that we've seen in the Prem. However, their expected goals conceded isn't actually as low, or as high rather, as you'd think, and therefore I think this is an interesting opportunity for maybe Aston Villa to play quite a defensive game, similar to the way they played versus Arsenal. Arsenal did find a lot of ways to break through that Aston Villa defense, but Emi Martinez made some fantastic saves. I'm kind of hoping here this is a game where, especially if Haaland might come off the bench, that Salah makes a lot more sense playing 90 minutes versus Everton, and I think that's the situation that we're finding ourselves in. I feel like Salah still looked great, still looked very fit playing deep into the second half of the game versus Newcastle, and I'm hoping he has the opportunity here to get a massive haul that we know he can consistently get, and that's going to be my team. I think captaincy on Salah. The second transfer, of course, I mentioned was going to be Ramsdale, but I feel like that the opportunity isn't there because with the RODRIGO injury and with the midweek games and so little rest for players, it just makes more sense to once again have 2 free transfers just in case wider issues arise in my team. Trossard is going to be the hidden gem, I suppose, of this team, especially since he's going to be such a huge differential for me, and I'd like to see what happens with that. There is, of course, an opportunity for me to move into Rashford tonight. We'll have to see the Leicester game and see what happens there, but as far as things stand, this is going to be my Game Week 6 team selection. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week.